Ever since I was subjected to high school, and it in turn subjected to me, I've liked to fall asleep to a little snippet of the song Superman by Laszlo Baines, followed by around half an hour of hospital absurdity in the show Scrubs. It was one of the first shows I ever binge-watched, a milestone that I was of the first generation to covet, for those of you watching in 2188. By the way, where did you guys go after the planet was demolished for that hyperspace bypass? Scrubs was a sitcom about a group of hospital interns navigating a teaching hospital. They navigated tragic patient cases and jaded superiors so that they could learn how to be good doctors. One thing that stuck with me about the series by the end was how they took their main character, JD, from a grounded but goofy intern to a wacky doctor let loose on a hospital to a grounded leader by the end of the series. The way they ended up handling JD in the final season was a solution to a problem that plagues many sitcoms: flanderization. Flanderization, for clarification, is the simplification of characterization down to an exaggeration, a transformation from dramatization to sterilization, a ramification of stagnation. Think Joey, Britta, Kevin, and Kelso, and how they went from absent-minded but charming to dumb stupid heads.
No, I'm doesn't.
The same thing happened in Scrubs to JD, but in JD's case, he goes from good to bad to good again. And if you want to hear why, then I'll do the rest of the video. At the beginning of the series, JD was a character with the best intentions who managed to overthink everything yet mess it up in spectacularly awkward fashion anyway. JD's good intentions got brake-checked by his character flaws, and he also suffered from that syndrome that a lot of sitcom characters around the time did, where he thought because he was generally kinder than most people, that excused all the narcissistic stuff he did. But while his flaws would probably make you slowly realize you don't want to talk to him anymore in real life, on TV they're unobtrusive and gave a likable character a chance to improve. Over the course of the first few seasons, JD learned a lot about the medical system, and we watched him go from bright-eyed and bushy-tailed to worn and a little jaded. The things he learned about how doctors and hospitals operated, how relationships were when you had to work at a hospital, and how his life was going to be from then on, made him change in ways that were both impressive and annoying. We also watched him affect those around him. His mentor, Dr. Cox, is a typically jaded and sarcastic doctor who, as he gets to know JD, dislikes his personality even more. But when we saw what was behind all the sarcasm, we also saw that JD's more positive traits were affecting Dr. Cox, and that Dr. Cox was growing to respect JD. Their relationship was dynamic and interesting, and that's how a lot of JD's relationships were in the first few seasons. JD and Eliot became a classic will they, won't they, but with an extra emphasis on how their neuroses were what was getting in the way of the relationship. Every time the pair got together, they would break up almost instantly. Then they would keep being friends, but with an extra layer of insecurity, until ultimately they would try again, and then fail again. Rinse, lather, repeat. This JD was a dynamic character. He had wacky qualities, and they served the wacky humor of the show, but he also was grounded by his empathy for his patients and his overwhelming optimism even after he becomes a little jaded. It made his character interesting to watch. We wanted to see him become a great doctor and a better person, so it was always rewarding when he got a little closer. We wanted to see him happy with himself, so it sucked when he wasn't. And at the end of season 3, that version of JD was led away to live on a farm somewhere. At least that's what Bill Lawrence told me when he walked him out back, with his trusty shotgun in hand. At the end of season 3, JD hit a low. In my self-examination, JD got back together with Eliot, in the process breaking her up with her boyfriend, except he decided he didn't love Eliot again. So he broke up with her right after breaking her up with her boyfriend. To be fair, Eliot did cheat on this boyfriend with JD, so I'm not sure the relationship was gonna last anyways, but that's not the point. Throughout the episode, JD felt like the worst parts of himself, his immaturity and his ego. It seemed like it might be a low moment that the character had to improve from, a bad way to leave him off in the season so that they could pick it up and improve when the next season came. The problem is, when the next season came, he didn't improve. He didn't change at all. Not for a really long time. It wasn't supposed to rain today. Oh good, it's getting louder. I can't be offended it's rain. But like, wow. Not rain that wasn't predicted. And is only registering louder and louder on the microphone. I guess we'll be back after the rain. After season 3, Scrubs sort of drifted from being a sitcom about how strange the life of a doctor could be to being a sitcom about how strange these doctors could be. The characters fought over an office, ran away from model planes, and just in general stopped doing anything that really related to being an actual doctor. The show had always been silly. We usually followed JD through the constant fantasies he was having that he would use to exaggerate and think about his predicament. But season 4 let that unreality bleed into reality. It was letting the characters engage in more wacky scenarios in real life and do things that normal people probably wouldn't do. It was a change that really hurt JD. Because after he was left in season 3 at such a low point character-wise, he never really got to recover. The show never really spent time reconciling how he behaved. He and Eliot had a wacky rivalry for a while, and then they were friends again. He didn't really learn anything from the experience. In fact, he kind of stopped learning altogether. His character was now a fairly competent doctor, but who was horrible with his personal relationships and had a weird sense of entitlement. Lessons bead up and roll off him like he has some sort of lesson repellent sheen in place. And his relationships became train wrecks. First he dated a lawyer who was suing his best friend, Turk. Then he dated a woman who he breaks up with because he can't stand that they aren't having sex. Then he kissed Turk's wife, Carla. But he never really spends time dwelling on doing any of those things. A lot of his complexity was dialed back. He was no longer a grounded character. He was just kind of an emotionally needy guy. He wasn't smart but immature. He was just kind of stupid. And he wasn't confident. He was just sort of self-absorbed. 2 episodes in season 7, My Hard Labor and My Inconvenient Truth, even try to lampshade it. And unlike the previous seasons, these character traits didn't fluctuate depending on who JD was with or at what stage they were in their relationship. He just kind of stagnated. He was going to be considered a great doctor deserving of praise, and a complete child in every other aspect. It made sense. The character needed to fit the more absurd direction the show was taking. The thing about JD in the first few seasons of the show is he could be unlikable a lot. Episodes focused heavily on how he had to prove he was the best at something, or how he had to prove that he was smarter than someone else. They were usually episodes where he was being a dick to somebody who didn't really deserve it. As I mentioned earlier, it was a character arc that you saw a lot of at the time. His character was a nerd, so he was smart and kind, but he also had a false sense of superiority and entitlement. It worked when the show was focused on watching the young doctors grow, because it gave JD a chance to improve. But once they were sort of knee-deep in their careers, you couldn't keep them having to learn lessons about being a doctor, and the show chose to go more absurd with the stories. But with the show focused more on comedy, JD couldn't be a nuanced dick all the time. It wasn't wacky. So the show kinda just made him a whiny baby. He goofed off, he was needy to his friends and coworkers, and he made bad call after bad call when it came to his personal life. His relationships became less complicated too. He and Dr. Cox went from having a relationship where Dr. Cox was just too proud to admit that JD was rubbing off on him, to a relationship where JD loves Dr. Cox and Dr. Cox hates JD. If JD was given arcs, they usually weren't very complex. Like the storyline where he dates a clumsy girl. If they were complex or added any sort of dynamic intrigue to his character, they usually didn't last very long. Like in the 6th season when JD accidentally gets his girlfriend at the time, Kim, pregnant. I don't even think they were dating. I think they might have just like... No, they weren't dating. Yeah, there's a whole joke in that episode about how it was barely even them sleeping. Okay, I remember. So not his girlfriend. Another doctor though, Kim, another doctor at the hospital. But it was a new challenge that would present him with an opportunity to learn something new. It would have forced the character to grow as he had to learn to deal with being a father. So, they ship Kim off for the season and have her lie about being pregnant still, so that JD doesn't have to change at all. The character from season 4 all the way through season 7 is completely flanderized. Which is hard to say seriously because of the Simpsons reference that's just right there. If he learned anything, he immediately unlearned it. He was childish and he hit the same note every episode, which made the character hard to root for. And then, something amazing happened.
Now that we're men, we have facial hair.
And like that, Scrubs was fixed. Okay, I should probably explain more. So at the end of season 7, Bill Lawrence was apparently told he had just barely gotten a season 8, so he treated it like his last. He wanted that last season to go back to the tone of the first few seasons, less goofy, more heart. Which was a decision that gave the writers an interesting task. Just as the nuanced JD wouldn't have fit the show's goofier tone, this flanderized JD wouldn't really fit the show's more grounded tone. They could have always tried to grow the character over the course of a few episodes. It's something the Office writers did when they were getting ready to write off Michael. They took a few episodes to give him a little arc to be ready to leave. It softened the blow and gave the episode that he left in a lot more weight. But The Office also didn't have to go through the same tone shift as Scrubs was about to have to go through. To gradually change JD would give a time crunch to the more standalone stories that the writers wanted to do. It could also risk making JD more unlikable if we have to watch him go through the same lesson once again. Instead, the writers decided rather than to change the character on screen, they could just show that the character had changed between seasons 7 and 8. Rather than have the audience watch him grow, it's just like we got a new JD that fit the new tone of the show. He was still goofy and immature, but he seemed more relaxed and in control than he had ever been. But they couldn't just flip the character over to a completely different characterization without doing anything, so they took the first few episodes to establish some character details. First, they gave him a beard. And while characters getting a beard is one of the most stereotypical ways that shows have introduced characters having grown over the years, it works within the context of the show. JD had been baby-faced for the entire series before, and it was a good reminder to the audience not to treat him or his stories too seriously. So, seeing him with a beard for the first time conveyed to the audience that he had changed in between the seasons. When it feels like Zach Braff is playing him more matured, it's reflected in the beard, along with a couple key lighting changes and the show's shift to HD. The second thing they did was introduce a whole new set of interns into the show. A new set of interns came in every couple of seasons, but usually those characters just served one-time jokes. The best they got was to react to the main cast, sometimes introduce problems, and in rare cases introduce storylines. But the season 8 interns were developed as their own characters. They got more focus in the main show, distinctive and dynamic personalities, and they even got their own cute little web show. They were super flawed characters who were either lazy or abrasive or competitive towards each other and the main cast. These flaws mirrored JD and his friends in the beginning stages of the show, and now JD got to be the one to help somebody overcome them. It gave the audience a chance to see how far JD had come as a person, and it reminded us that he wasn't the same guy anymore. He was no longer the character who needed to grow up, he was now helping other characters grow up. The third thing they did was get JD back together with Eliot, except for this time it sticks. In the past, the show worked with the idea that the characters were too in their own way to have a relationship with each other, because they both overthought things neither of them ever actually connected. When the writers put them back together early in season 8, they gave the viewers evidence that the characters had changed and overcome one of their biggest flaws. They handled the relationship more maturely, and this time it didn't last 1 to 2 episodes. It lasted the rest of the season. Even though we didn't see JD grow to be able to handle these things, we now see that he can. It didn't feel too jarring. We had seen him learn these lessons over and over again, so it made sense that at some point they would finally stick. And it does. He took it well when he realized his relationship with Dr. Cox was about to have to become more antagonistic because of Dr. Cox's role as the chief of medicine. It's something I can't imagine JD from even the previous season being able to get over. He also made decisions that were in the best interest of his son, even if it meant having to change his own life. He also got to be aware of his son now, and he helps interns through problems that he probably would have just acted superior to them over before. The fourth and final thing that the show did to help out JD's character was give him the episode My Last Words. Throughout the series, the most immature episodes for JD tended to be those that he shared with Turk. Granted, those episodes did tend to be the most fun, but they lent to some of his problems ever being serious in those middle seasons. So My Last Words started almost promising a classic JD and Turk adventure. JD and Turk prepare for their annual steak dinner, which they have a dance routine choreographed for. It was all ready to be a wacky adventure for the two, but before they started, they had to check on one last patient. And they visited George, a patient who was close to death. After getting to know him a little, they decided to forego steak night in favor of just sitting with him in his final hours. So in the episode, they just sit and talk about what they think death is like. No crazy antics, just the three of them talking about death on a man's last night to live. It was a new type of story for the duo that normally served up some of the show's most absurd moments. More importantly, it showed a side of JD that felt like it had been lacking for a while, his empathy for patients. Compared to Season 5's My Big Bird, where JD and Turk deliberately left a patient to fight a bird, this is insane. It's super refreshing compared to any of the episodes in the previous seasons where JD seemed to forget he was a doctor. Here, JD and Turk just sit in a room with a man who could use the company. And with that, JD went from a ridiculous clown doctor to one of my favorite characters in sitcoms. The writers, crew, and Braff did an excellent job doing 4 seasons worth of damage control on a character who felt like he might never grow up. And sure, he did have a few episodes after that felt a little bit goofier, but that's just part of the charm of Scrubs. The episodes in the Bahamas felt like a send-off to the goofier side of JD, with him and Turk preoccupied the entire time with a curse. But overall, his character regained the nuance that he had in the early seasons. He grew in a way that he probably earned a couple seasons prior, but that he earned nonetheless. When I first watched the show, once I got around the season 6 mark, I wasn't sure I was ever going to get to see JD's story resolved. I've always loved sitcoms, and from my experience at the time, characters who got flanderized normally did not go back. But the Scrubs writers deflanderized JD practically in between seasons, and then set him up with a full emotional arc that led him right into his final hurrah, a finale that might go down as one of the best in TV history. Then season 9 didn't happen. You made it up. How dare you
leave